Imagine the following situation. You and your German friend want to cross the street, but there is a car approaching very quickly that he doesn't notice. So you want to warn your friend by yelling, "Watch out," or "Come back," but then it hits you. You haven't learned the imperative yet, and now your friend is dead. See how important it is? And this is exactly why you should watch this video and learn everything there is to know about how to give commands and requests in German. Let's go! Tag an alle, my name is Florian and I've been a German teacher since 2018. As mentioned in the intro, the imperative is an important topic and it's easier to learn than you might expect. So in today's video, I'll be going over all the rules you need to form the imperative and provide you with some extra information you probably haven't heard yet. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. What is the imperative? First and foremost, the imperative is a verb form. That means that you need to change the ending. What exactly that looks like is something I'll be covering a bit later in the video. First, we need to take a look at what changing the verb from its infinitive form to its imperative form does to the meaning. Well, we're basically changing moods. We're no longer talking about facts, that is called the indicative mood. We're now talking about requests, orders, or commands, the imperative mood. Yeah, you heard me right. This verb form has its own sentence type assigned to it. Cool, right? In English, you just use the infinitive to express the imperative mood. Give, say, do, etc. In German, however, there's a bit more to remember, so let's get into it. As imperative clauses are their own type of sentence, they come with certain rules. In this case, it's pretty simple. Put the verb into the first position in its imperative form, regardless of whether the clause is positive or negative. A potential separable prefix or a second verb, if there is any, is placed in the last field as usual. And of course, the rest of the sentence is located in the third field, so we get a table like this. The second field is reserved for the subject, but more on that later. Forming the imperative. Let's move on to the most useful segment of this video, actually forming the imperative. In order to understand this part, you absolutely need to know the conjugation of different verb classes. If you haven't done that yet, make sure to click this info card right here to get straight to my video about that topic. Now, we can just grab the same table we've gone through in that video and use it to cover all the different imperative forms. We're not going to be using the same verbs necessarily, but the classes and their rules stay the same. In German, you need to pay attention to who you are addressing with the imperative. There are three separate forms. One for the informal du, one person, one for the informal ihr, two or more people, and finally one for the formal sie, any number of people. Let's start with the informal imperative for one person, du. In fact, it's pretty simple. There are only two steps you need to take. First, put the verb into its second person singular form. Sagen, du sagst. Then cut off the st ending and omit du, and you end up with sag. By the way, in writing, don't forget to put an exclamation mark at the end of the sentence, because now we have an imperative clause. Sag mir die Wahrheit, tell me the truth. Alright, I can already hear the objections. Why didn't I just cut off the en part of the infinitive? Isn't it the same? Well, let's cover the second group, the ten-den class then, and see how far that theory gets you. Again, put the verb into its second person singular form, retten, du rettest. Remember, in this group you need to keep the e in the stem, and then cut off st, omit du, and you get rette, not ret. Rette die Prinzessin vor Bowser, save the princess from Bowser. And there you have it, that's exactly why you need the second person singular for the imperative. The same is even more true for the classes with root vowel changes, but you'll see. An example for a verb with the ending den would be finden, which then turns into finde. Finde alle Katzen auf dem Bild. Find all cats in the picture. Now, for the sen class, it's a little bit different. The second person singular form of küssen is du küsst. But since the second s is part of the root, you only take away the t, which you then can apply to all the other verbs of this group. Thus, the imperative of küssen is küss. Oh, küss nicht den Frosch, don't kiss the frog. Anyway, let's cover all the other possibilities. A verb with sz, for example, beißen, becomes du beißt, and finally, beiß. Beiß nicht zu stark auf die Kirsche, don't bite the cherry too hard. Now a verb with z. Tanzen, du tanzt, tanz. Tanz ihr nicht so auf der Nase herum. Literally, don't dance around on her nose like that. Yeah, this is an idiomatic expression which means don't mess with her or don't walk all over her. It's a good one, you should write this down. Finally, a verb with TZ, for example, schätzen, to estimate or to take a guess. Du schätzt, schätz. Schätz mal, wie viel der Ring gekostet hat. Take a guess how much the ring cost. Anyway, next group. The first group with the root vowel change, E to E. Here, it's even more important to go through the second person singular stage. Let me demonstrate why with the verb geben, to give. Geben, du gibst, gib. Not geb. Gib mir bitte eine Minute. Give me 1 minute, please. Even Germans mess this one up sometimes, and it sounds terrible. It's not ess deinen Brokkoli, it is deinen Brokkoli. The same change is true for the next group, the E to EA class. Let's use the verb befehlen, to command or to order somebody to do something, and put it into its imperative form. No linguistic pun intended. Befehlen, du befiehlst, befiehl. Befiehl ihnen in die Schlacht zu ziehen. Order them to go into battle. Very dramatic. But I want to show you another verb from this class, lesen, to read. First, we put it into the second person singular form. Lesen, du liest. But now make sure to not take away the S, as it is part of the root. So the imperative is not li, but lies. Lies, was da steht. Read what's written there. Moving on to the next class with a root vowel change, A to ä. Let's use the word schlafen, to sleep, as an example. As usual, put it into the second person singular form. Du schläfst. And now something really weird happens. To get the imperative form, you still need to cut off st at the end and omit du, but you also have to reverse the root vowel change. Ä is turned back into a, so it is schlaf, not schläf. I don't know why that is, but I guess we came up with that rule to not make German too easy to learn. Here's an example. Schlaf, Kindlein, schlaf. Sleep, little child, sleep. Which I might have taken from a very popular nursery rhyme in Germany.
Schlaf, Kindlein, schlaf.
And this irregularity applies to all verbs of this class. Tragen, to carry or to wear. Du trägst, but trag. Halten, to hold. Du hältst, but halt. Or laufen, to run. Du läufst, but lauf. Alright, let's talk about the last two classes. First, verbs that end in ERN. With these, it's pretty straightforward. You take a verb, for instance, ändern, to change, put it into the second person singular form, du änderst, cut off st and omit du, and you end up with änder. Schnell, änder dein Passwort. Quick, change your password. One thing to notice here is that in a more poetic context, and especially in written German, we're much more likely to write ändere with an e at the end. That's the main catch. Alright, let's talk about the ELN class and use the verb lächeln, to smile, as an example. Lächeln, du lächelst, lächel. Du hast Depressionen? Lächel einfach mehr. You're depressed? Just smile more. Similar to the ERN class, this group also has a more poetic or literary form, lächle. You get this form by swallowing the e in front of the l and add one at the end. So it kind of works like lächeln, du lächelst, lächel, lächle. Little side note here, the much older form lächele is now obsolete and only exists in some German dialects. Wat die ich mache? Lächele? Ich lächele doch den ganzen Tag. And that's it with the imperative for du. Now you might be thinking, God, this video is already pretty long, how much more is there to learn? But you might be surprised by the fact that you're 90% done. The imperative for ihr, when talking to two or more people, is incredibly simple. The only thing you need to do is to use the verb in the second person plural form without the pronoun ihr. Sagen, ihr sagt, sagt. Retten, ihr rettet, rettet. Küssen, ihr küsst, küsst. Geben, ihr gebt, gebt. Careful here, the correct form is gebt, not gibt. Lesen, ihr lest, lest. Schlafen, ihr schlaft, schlaft. Ändern, ihr ändert, ändert. And finally, lächeln, ihr lächelt, lächelt. See? I told you it was easy. Now the only form left to cover is the formal sie, which is as simple. You put the verb into its third person plural form and then don't cut off the personal pronoun sie. Instead, just reverse the word order. Sagen, sie sagen, sagen sie. And that's it, you're done. The rest of the classes are conjugated like this. Retten, retten Sie. Küssen, Sie küssen, küssen Sie. Geben, Sie geben, geben Sie. Lesen, Sie lesen, lesen Sie. Schlafen, Sie schlafen, schlafen Sie. Ändern, Sie ändern, ändern Sie. And lächeln, Sie lächeln, lächeln Sie. Keep in mind, though, that by the mandatory inclusion of the personal pronoun Sie, this can also be seen as a question. To solve that problem in writing, you add an exclamation mark instead of a question mark. So, like this. In conversation, the intonation at the end of the sentence matters. Geben Sie mir die Dokumente? That is a question. Geben Sie mir die Dokumente? That is an order. The irregular class. As mentioned in my video about verb conjugation, there are 6 verbs that behave a bit differently. Sein, to be, haben, to have, werden, to become, wissen, to know, tun, to do, and nehmen, to take. Let's go through every form of each verb. These you have to know by heart, but they still follow the same kind of pattern. Sein. Sei, seid, seien Sie. Haben. Hab, habt, haben Sie. This verb in its imperative form isn't used all that much, besides constructions like hab keine Angst, don't be afraid, literally don't have fear, or expressions like hab dich nicht so, don't be such a baby, which literally translates to don't have yourself like that. Werden, werde, werdet, werden Sie. Wissen. Wisse, wisst, wissen Sie. You probably won't ever need this one. The imperative of wissen is very poetic and never used in daily conversation. Unless you're a genie and want to fulfill 3 wishes. In that case, you're good. Tun. Tu, tut, tun Sie. This one's kind of funny. Nehmen. Nimm, nehmt, nehmen Sie. Now, after learning all of that, you might have noticed that only in the formal imperative we keep the pronoun Sie. You can imagine it being placed in the second field of the clause. But did you know that you can actually do the same for the informal imperatives with du and ihr? There are some restrictions though. This can only be done if you want to redirect a request or a task or command to the person you're talking to. Something like, frag du ihn, you ask him, or macht ihr das, you guys do that. However, for most purposes, leaving out the pronouns will do the trick. Alright, before we end the video, I want to briefly go over other types of verbs and how they are affected by the imperative. I won't spend too much time on this, but it's good to know. Let me blend in the sentence structure to make it easier for y'all to keep track. I will use the do imperative for all the examples, since the other forms are even simpler. The first group, inseparable verbs, behave like normal verbs. You keep the prefix attached and make the verb imperative. Besuch deine Eltern öfter. Visit your parents more often. The second group are separable verbs, which are a bit more interesting. You only conjugate the root of the verb as usual, and then add the separable prefix at the end, as you do normally. Lies das bitte laut vor. Read that out loud, please. The third group are reflexive verbs. If you haven't dealt with them so far, check out this video I've made to get the fundamentals you need to understand this section. Basically, you need to adjust the reflexive pronoun to the imperative form. Let me show you how that works by using the verb sich kümmern in the context of to deal with something. Kümmer dich das Problem. Kümmert euch das Problem. Kümmern Sie sich das Problem. Deal with this problem. Now this was an accusative reflexive verb. The same, of course, works with the dative too. For example, sich merken, to memorize. Merk dir diese Wörter. Merkt euch diese Wörter. Merken Sie sich diese Wörter. Memorize these words. If that reflexive verb has an inseparable prefix, you just keep it attached to the stem. But in the worst case scenario, you have to conjugate a reflexive verb with a separable prefix. For example, sich vorbereiten auf, to prepare for something. Let's give it a shot. Bereite dich gut auf die Prüfung vor. Bereitet euch gut auf die Prüfung vor. Bereiten Sie sich gut auf die Prüfung vor. Prepare well for the exam. Looks quite terrifying, I know, but the pattern stays the same. Alright, you've made it. Are you ready for a fun fact? We actually have an additional type of imperative in the first person plural, so wir. And it behaves like the SIE-Imperative, with the mir being mandatory. You can find it in sentences like fangen wir an, let's start, or gehen wir los, let's go. The main difference to lasst uns anfangen and lasst uns gehen is that the first person imperative wir sounds way softer and isn't used nearly as much as the constructions with lassen. By the way, the word lassen is quite a big topic in itself, but I'll cover that in a future lesson, so stay tuned. Having said that, thank you so much for watching, and make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment if there's anything left unclear. We'll see each other soon, and until then, haut rein!